don't get pissed off very often. In fact, when I do get pissed off, like any good hockey coach, I take 24 hours before I even justify anything with a response. But after Steve Simmons made his comments last week, not once, but twice, as a native Quebecer, I got pissed off. Let's discuss. Hey gang, Coach here from Buck Talk Montreal, and I have to get into it because every summer, it seems, Steve Simmons, in the dog days of August, decides to say something absolutely asinine to draw national attention to himself. International, actually, if you think about it, because Jimmy Murphy had something to say about it on Twitter, saying it was disgusting and uncalled for and insulting to Sam Montembeault. And for those of you who probably didn't hear it, but you did, Steve Simmons of the Toronto Stars suggested that Sam Montembeault was on the Olympic roster as the third goaltender as a token Quebecois, meaning that there aren't enough good French players in the National Hockey League to justify having them on. So to appease the province of Quebec, they added Sam Montembeault. I mean, that comment in and of itself is Damien Cox territory, in the sense that it serves a purpose as what? As clickbait, because people went out looking for it. Oh, what did Simmons say? Oh my God, I can't believe he insulted Quebecers like that. Believe it. Why? Because he does it all the time. You know, you might pretend that you're educated because you're a journalist in the Toronto Sun, but at the end of the day, it's the Sun. It's just like us taking the Journal de Montréal seriously. And in his article, Simmons actually references a Quebec publication putting stats for Quebec-born Olympians next to Canadian-born Olympians as a separate country. I got news for you, Steve. It happens here all the time. It's nothing new. It's been happening since the 1960s. And it's not going to change anytime soon. That battle between, I wouldn't even call it a battle. The discussion between French and English is going to happen until the end of time in the province of Quebec. And for no good reason. Because as the son of an immigrant, I can tell you that my parents put as much emphasis on me learning French as they did English, or even Greek for that matter. It was important. My father, despite the fact not being able to speak a lick of English when he came to Canada, learned to speak French first. So go figure that one out. Granted, his French was not that great because in his circles, he didn't have to talk French all that often. But he made an effort. And so people do that. Older generations of immigrants that came to Quebec did that without having to be forced. As a sign of, you know what, I want to integrate into the Quebec culture. I taught that to my kids, despite the fact that my kids, you know, they oftentimes have certain opinions about Quebec-born people that, to me, are distasteful. And I'm not proud of them when they say things because it's not the Quebec I grew up in. I grew up in a neighborhood, just to give you guys a little bit of background, that was predominantly French. Okay? I lived in a little street in front of the church where former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau got married. And everybody from one corner to the other was French. We were the only English-speaking family on the block. And here's the fun part. The people back then, knowing that I really wanted to learn how to speak French, took the time to explain words to me so I can understand them and get a better grasp so that when I went to school, I could speak French in a way that at least was communicable, which was great. But now, comments by guys like Simmons it's like you're trying to turn the rest of the country against Quebec, and that's just freaking wrong on so many levels. I mean, and you take a look at it, right, as it stands right now. When you look at the people that are going to Team Canada, yes, the majority, all of them, except for Sam Montembeault, are from outside the province of Quebec. And that's wrong because there are players that deserve to at least have a look. Pierre-Luc Dubois had 82 points last season with the LA Kings. Turned his career around because the year before it wasn't that great. He deserved to get a look. Jonathan Huberdeau, who is not great just offensively, but he's a defensive stalwart, something that the Canadiens always want to bring with them to tournaments, had 81 points for the Calgary Flames. Why isn't he there? It's not because they're Quebec-born. It's a choice that's made by the coaching staff. Who's the coaching staff? John Cooper, Peter DeBoer. So they're going to pick the players that they're familiar with. John Cooper brought a set of players over to the Four Nations face-off in February. Don't you think the majority of the roster is going to want to bring to the Olympics is going to look the same, given the fact that they won the bloody tournament? That one makes sense to me. Right? Wouldn't it make sense to you? And to say that Quebec-born players, you need a token player on the team. Let me tell you something, buddy. There have always been Quebecers on Team Canada at the Olympics or even the World Junior Hockey Championships. At the Olympics in 2002, if you remember correctly, Mario Lemieux, Simon Gagné, Ray Bourque, they were all there. Actually, I can't remember if Ray Bourque was there. He might have retired by then. But they were there. Lemieux and Gagné were there. 2 Quebecers. Probably more than that. I can't remember the roster offhand. You know, you look at 1998, definitely. Hey, wait a minute. Quebecers on the 2002 team that won gold for the first time in 50 some odd years. Roberto Luongo started the tournament as the starting goaltender. He's from Quebec. And so did Marty Brodeur. He's from Quebec. So token Quebecers? No. If Simmons would have turned around and said that the quality of the game in Quebec right now is such that we're not producing as many good players as we used to, I would be all for that. That's a justification and it makes sense. And it's not based on language because God knows that's not the issue here. It's based on quality. And that I can get behind because there haven't been that many quality goaltenders to come out of the province of Quebec in quite some time. When you think about it, the last Quebec-born goaltender that was drafted quite highly in the NHL draft was Marc-Andre Fleury, who was drafted by the Pittsburgh Penguins at the time. Back in, I believe it was 2003, if memory serves. And then you take a look at, some of the other guys. The Montreal Canadiens have drafted 2 Quebec-born goaltenders in the last 2 drafts, Quentin Miller and Alexis Cournoyer. Are they doing it because they're Quebec-born? No, they're doing it because they're available and they think they'll be a good addition to the organization. Them being Quebecers, it's a plus. And honestly, I didn't even know Quentin Miller was a Quebecer until I looked it up. Devin Levi is another one that comes to mind that got drafted recently by the Buffalo Sabres and is playing in Rochester right now to get his game together. There are a lot of good Quebec-born goaltenders, but not as many as we used to have. I think in the last 10 or 15 years, there have maybe been 20 goaltenders tops that have even been drafted out of the queue. Why is that? Because the Quebec Maritime Junior Hockey League, I'll never get used to that, is an offense-first league. And it's a league that's run and pushed by a bunch of guys that are trying to line their pockets as opposed to developing hockey players. It's sad to say. And I can't say that about every organization, but the league as a whole, that is their vision. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the exorbitant amount of points in that league. And last season, if you remember, they got shut out of the first round. That's not something you want to see from one of your major junior hockey leagues in Canada, is it? But that's what happened. And it's not about language because the Quebec Maritime Junior Hockey League also has players that are imports playing in that league. So why would you say language? What the hell difference does it make? Let me put an example out to you, okay, just for shits and giggles. You're talking about language, and let's all make it clear here that the Journal de Montréal is a newspaper that's run by Quebecor. Quebecor is owned by the former leader of the Parti Québécois, Pierre-Carl Pelado, a noted separatist, wants Quebec to be an independent country. If he wants that, that's fine. It's great. Everybody's allowed to have their opinion. I say that on this show about hockey, and I say that about everything. All right? You can have your opinion about whatever you want. Doesn't make you right, doesn't make you wrong, but you're allowed to have it. But they constantly put out stuff like that. Why? Because it generates clicks. It generates traffic. It makes their advertisers happy. That's why the whole discussion about the language is so popular. Because whether you're looking at it from the French side, Steve Simmons did them a favor. Because now all they need to do is write an article about it and, oh shit, here goes the neighborhood. In fact, I actually came across an article that was written in 2010 by former NHLer Bob Sirois about how Hockey Canada ignores Quebec-born players. And it cites in the article that Mario Lemieux never played in the World Junior Hockey Championship. Wrong, asshole. In fact, he played in 83 and decided not to play in 84 because his team at the time, the Laval Voisins, were gunning for the Memorial Cup and he didn't want to leave the team. Back then, it wasn't about playing over the Christmas holidays. The tournament was at a different time, right? It didn't start on Boxing Day. It wasn't as organized, right? It was on CBC, actually, I think, back then. And it wasn't well covered. Not as well as it is now. So there's that. There's also another part that Serrois puts in his article where he says Patrick Roy never played in the World Junior Hockey Championship. That's a load of bung too, because Patrick Roy was on the 1985 gold medal team. So who do you believe? And this guy's a former NHLer who wrote this article about Quebecers not being favorable with Hockey Canada. And what do you know? Here are two classic examples of superstars from the province of Quebec who did make it and were, at the time, okay, granted. In his last year of junior, Mario Lemieux put up 282 points. But Patrick Roy was getting bombarded in Granby back in 1985. It's one of the reasons why the Montreal Canadiens decided to draft him, because he was getting bombarded so much and his save percentage looked good. So they decided, you know what, let's take a shot and see how it goes. And lo and behold, he turned out to be one of the best goaltenders in NHL history. Same holds true for Marty Brodeur, by the way, because the Laser that he played for in St. Hyacinthe, they weren't a great team, but he got a lot of work. A lot of work. And he got attention at that point. So Steve Simmons, don't come out here with your anti-Quebec sentiment and try to spew it for everybody else in Ontario and in Toronto especially, to say that the reason why Montembeault is there is because he's a Quebec-born goaltender and we need to have a token Quebecer. If that's your mentality, how about you call Major League Baseball and say, listen, stop putting one representative from every team in the All-Star game when they don't deserve to be there. Or maybe do that in the NFL or the NBA or whatever sport you want to look at, even the National Hockey League. Why would you do that? For what? So that you can piss somebody off? You want to have representatives there, right? Yes. But I don't think that somebody from Quebec would want to see a player that has 20 points on the Olympic team when they're going for gold. Would we agree? And by the same token, I don't think that somebody would want to see Devin Levi as the third goaltender as opposed to Sam Montembeault. And it's not because his name is French, because Devin Levi is a Jewish player from Montreal, born in Quebec. So go figure, Mr. Simmons. Ball's in your court. Stop with this rhetoric about the language issue, because the language issue only gets reignited by idiots like you. So go crawl back into the hole you came out of. Go and find something else to write about. Stick to your beloved Blue Jays, Canada's team. Funny you should mention that, since the Expos were the first team in Canadian history, but I digress, right? Because you wanted to contract them, didn't you? That's what you voted for in Toronto, right? Because you wanted to be the only team in Canada, the sole survivor, because the world revolves around Toronto. You see how this works? I don't need to think like that. It's the impression I get. Why? Because of a-holes like you. If we were all honest about our thought process and didn't try to fester shit as we go along, we might not have any of this bickering going on back and forth in our lives, especially from a political perspective or a language perspective. Because with me, I get along with anybody. Speak French, speak English, I don't care. You're polite, I'm polite. You're rude, I'm rude. That's how the world works. And it doesn't matter what language you are. So, play. Whether you're Sam Montembeault or Sam Orlesky or Sam Jones, I don't care. If you're good enough to play with Team Canada, you're good enough. And one last thing before I go here, Mr. Simmons. Let's also bear in mind that just a couple of seasons ago, Sam Montembeault was the goaltender of record for Team Canada at the World Hockey Championships, where he proved himself on the international stage. A lot of other goaltenders in the National Hockey League, Quebec-born or not, can't say the same thing. And he played extremely well in that tournament back in 2024. So take your language issue and token Quebecer mentality and stick it.